Firstly, good evening, and thank you all for joining Binny's as we celebrate the fabulous wine coming out of Argentina. And I have a star-studded panel with me tonight. We're looking ahead to Malbec World Day on April 17th. So we will be focusing on that grape variety and highlighting the country's great diversity. My name is Alicia Barrett. I'm wine educator at Binny's, and I'm joined by 5 esteemed guests tonight. First, we have Thibaut Delmotte, winemaker for Colome in the Salta province. For Binny's customers watching, you'll know Colome on our shelves from their white wine of Torrontés and their Malbec, which we're going to taste this evening. Next, we have Sebastian Zuccardi, third generation of the Zuccardi family in Mendoza. It was Sebastian's grandfather who first planted their vines in 1963. Luis Reginato of Luca is our third guest. He's been working with Laura Catena since 1999 and stays very busy, not only making wine for Luca, but also for La Posta and serving as vineyard director for Catena Zapata. And then the last wine we're going to have tonight is from Clo De Los Siete, a project of the famous Bordeaux consultant Michel Roland, which is now really kind of run by 4 Bordeaux families. We have the honor of having Amanda Torcivia, brand manager of the winery, with us. And lastly, Veronica Cathuria of Wines of Argentina has joined and will kick us off by sharing a brief note about Malbec World Day. And as I said, please go ahead and start with the Colome Malbec. That's where we're going to head to first after this little introduction. And any questions that you have along the way, this is your chance to speak with these amazing winemakers. Please submit those using the Q&A function on Zoom. So Veronica, I will share a little slide here. But thank you for joining us. And we'll play a little video and then you can tell us about Malbec World Day.
Well, thank you. We were face to face. I'd probably have a little bit longer video to allure our participants to want to visit Argentina. But let me tell you a little bit about Malbec World Day and why we're here. So Malbec World Day was actually a global initiative created by Wines of Argentina that sought out to position Malbec Argentino in the world and celebrate the success of our national wine industry. So to give you a little background, and it'll be brief, a little bit of history here. Malbec is actually originated in the region of Cahors. Cahors is in the southwest region of France, about 200 miles west of Bordeaux, where they grew cut. Now, cut dates back to the Roman Empire, and they enjoy these wines by the royalty and the elite. Fast forward to the 1800s. None other than a Frenchman named Michel Pouget was the person that introduced Malbec to Argentina. It was the national Argentine national government who actually appointed Michel Pouget to carry out the management of our agricultural quinta in Mendoza, which is a research center and agronomy school. The goal of this school that they opened up was in order to basically incorporate new varietals, the French noble grapes, including Malbec, as a means to enhance the Argentine wine industry. So the appointment of Michel Pouget was on April 17th, 1853. So about 200 years before Sebastian's grandfather started working in the vineyards. What happened 10 years later, so this was 1853 of April 17th, we started introducing these varietals. And 10 years later, the world hits with phylloxera. So what happened to cut and all the French vineyards is that they really, they died. Phylloxera is the root louse that really sucks the sap out of the vines and killed all the vines. So luckily we had them planted in Argentina, and because of our natural barriers, we have the Andes Mountains to the west and the Atlantic to the east. We never got phylloxera. So we were lucky to have introduced these varietals and have them exceed in Argentina. it was with the help of the French and Italian immigrants that really were planting and discovered that Malbec really appealed to our rugged terrain and diverse terrain, and basically ended up performing far better than it did in Cahors. So again, we celebrate April 17th in honor of the kickoff of our wine industry, if you will, and we honor our winemakers. So today we're going to toast with and toast to Malbec, and we're very lucky to have these winemakers talk a little bit more about their wines and their region and their diversity. So to use April 1st today, so you have about 16 days to discover Malbec until you do your official toast on the 17th. So with that, I let it back to Alicia so that she can introduce these winemakers. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and cheers, Veronica. Thank you for that introduction. And yeah, I mean, let's get into it. I really want to make sure we hear from our panel tonight. And so we're going to start in the north of Argentina, in the Salta province. And Thibaut, can you tell us about Colome? Those here tonight probably know that perhaps you are coming from France, and so maybe a little bit of your history and what brought you to Argentina, but tell us about Colome and this estate Malbec that we have.
Yes, okay. Good evening to everybody. Very, very nice to meet you, and very happy to share my wine with you. So yeah, my name is Thibaut Delmotte. I am the winemaker of Bodega Colome in the northwest of Argentina. And I'm originally from Burgundy. I work in Burgundy and in Bordeaux until 2004. And since 2005, I am the winemaker of Colome. So 16 years now in this winery. Before speaking about this particular wine, I want to explain that we are not in the Mendoza province. We are way in the north. We are 1,000 miles north of Mendoza in the Salta province. So it's very close to Bolivian border and Chilean border. And the characteristic of this area is that we are basically almost on the Tropic of Capricorn. So you can imagine that at sea level, you can't grow vineyard because it's too warm and too humid. So we have to go in high altitude to find healthy weather for the vineyard. So we have vineyard planted between 1,700 meters, which is around 6,000 feet, to 3,100 meters, which is 10,200 feet, one of the highest vineyard in the world. So the condition in this area, because of altitude, and we have mountain on the east and in the west, so it's very dry. We have very low rain. We're speaking around 150 millimeters per year, which is around 4 inches, sorry. Just a light cut in my office, sorry. And we are very remote from the closest town, Salta. It's 4 hours drive, and we don't have electric line. We have to produce our own electricity, and we just have a trouble with our generator, most likely. But since we still have internet, so that's fine. So yeah, I was saying because of altitude on the mountain, we have a very dry weather and very healthy. So we have very low disease in this place. And also because of altitude, we have a lot of UV radiation. We have less ozone in the atmosphere. So we have a lot of UV radiation. And the fruit, to protect itself from this UV, is producing a thicker and darker skin. And this gave, of course, the color and the concentration to the wine. But also, which is very, very interesting for us, it's a big thermal amplitude between day and night. We have around almost 20 degrees difference, which also help a lot for keeping the freshness and the elegancy of the wine. And also something important about Colome, it's a very old winery. It exists since 1831. Actually, it's most likely the oldest winery in activity in Argentina. And we have very old vineyard. We're lucky enough to have 8 hectares of vineyard close to 150 years old, and with pre-phylloxera Malbec actually, so, and some cab also. So it's a very nice treasure we have here. What I'm going to speak about today is our Colome estate. is our most iconic wine of the winery. So this is a Malbec from 4 different terroirs, from four different estates at 4 different altitude. So we have fruit from 1,700 meters, 6,000 feet. That's a warmer terroir for us, and it's a very sandy place. So it gave a lot of fruit profile, ripe fruit profile, and very sweet tannins, but it's not too complex. So it really helps to give fruit and round tannins. And after, the backbone really of this wine is from the farm of Colome at 2,400 meters, which is 7,500 feet. And this is much more complex profile of Malbec. It gives a lot of red and black fruit, very spicy. And also there is a lot of clay in the soil, so it's gives a lot of volume in the mouth. And after this, we have Malbec from 2,600 meters in El Arenal Vineyard, which is 8,500 feet. And it's very sandy, so it gives a lot of red fruit, fresh red fruit, and very floral aromas, and very tight tannins, and very nice and vibrant acidity. So it gives a lot of life to the blend. And the last little touch in this blend of Malbec, it's Malbec from 3,111 meters, 10,200 feet. And this is very difficult to ripe at this altitude, as you can imagine. It's very fresh during the night, and we have very cool temperature during January and February, our summer. So it's tough to ripe. So it's really much more red fruit driven, with a lot of violet in the nose, and very vibrant acidity. Also give a lot of life to this blend. And all this parcel with different altitude are harvested in different time, of course, with the warmer first, the lower altitude, and we're going up in altitude to finish with the highest one. Actually now, 1st of April, we finish the 2 lowest part, and we still have some fruit at 8,500 feet and 10,200 feet. We still have maybe 8-10 days of harvest to finish this year. And this Colome estate is fermented in stainless steel, and after is going to age for 15 months in French oak barrels, from new to only 10 to 15% new. We don't want to make oaky wine. We're just more about freshness and to respect the fruit profile of the wine. And so we use around 15% of new oak. And after this, at least, we spend 6 months in bottle before release. So for me, it's a very characteristic wine from the northwest, from the Calchaquí Valley where we are. The biggest difference I would say with Mendoza, it's a little more concentrate. We have a little more structure in the wine, mostly because of the altitude. Also, the color is also always very nice because of the very thick and dark color. Very complex in the nose, red and black fruit. It's spicy, and in the same time we have this wild note from the north, a little balsamic and spicy from the Malbec growing here.
It's absolutely lovely, Thibaut, and you're right that tannic structure is much kind of firmer. If you have all 4 wines tonight, you'll notice this is probably the deepest in color of the wines that we have. And I want to ask you as well, right before we started, Veronica made a great comment how Salta is like if you were to imagine Utah and Colorado and lay down some vineyards there, and that's kind of what it looks like and what it feels like. When you came over to Argentina from France, why did you pick Salta? I mean, so many winemakers go to Mendoza, and we'll move down there soon. But what about Salta really struck you when you first visited?
Well, actually, I didn't went to Argentina for working. I went as a tourist. I was backpacking around the country, and I really fall in love with Salta. Not really for the wine first, I must say. It was mostly because of the culture of Salta. It's very more Andean culture that I was looking for when I came to South America. And also all Argentinian people is very warm, and it surprised me when you're coming from Europe, a little more cold. But in Salta, it's you have to go deeper with people. First, we're a little like this, and you have to go deeper. But once you have friends there, they are very warm, and that's really why I decided to stay in Argentina. It's really because of people, and I was lucky enough to meet the owner of Colome, which is Donald Hess, also owner of his collection in Napa, and it was for him very difficult to find winemakers to stay in this area. Like I say, we are 4 hours drive from the closest airport, and I have there is no school. It's really tricky to live here. It's a little town, little village in the middle of nowhere. And when we start to speak, and he offered me the work, I was only 27. For me, it was just too big for me. But we really built a great relationship, and we grow together. That's exactly what he told me the first day we met, and it happens like this. We really grow together. And I would say, like him, like Mr. S, why S came to Salta, to Mendoza, to do something different, to do something atypical, and also his goal was to do at the time the highest vineyard in the world, which was for a while, and that's all the challenge that for him, and the same for me. What was really why we chose Salta.
Thank you. So we're going to go through each of the wines, and then we'll all come back together and do some Q&A and chat amongst the panel of some other topical Argentine issues with wine. So let's move down to Mendoza. And Sebastian, would you mind introducing us to Zuccardi, and specifically to these Zuccardi Q Malbec from the Uco Valley?
Thank you, Alicia. Go to where Thibaut is making wine is an amazing trip. It's unique. The identity of the north of Argentina is fantastic. But he's not anymore a French guy. He's a Salteño now. He's from Salta, and it's fantastic what he's doing there. Like you said, I'm the 3rd generation in the family making wine. My grandfather started the winery in the '63, but he wasn't an agriculture guy. He had a building company, but he developed a very efficient irrigation system at that time. And he discovered that through this irrigation system that his passion was agriculture. I was lucky with this decision of my grandfather to continue planting vineyards. And then when my father joined the company, he decided to put all his energy in wine. And in the 3rd generation, we are 3, and each of us did a little bit of refundation of the family. And my brother is making olive oil. My sister runs all the hospitality of the family, and I decided to put my life in wine. But my family used to cultivate in lower altitude areas, and I said to the family, okay, we have to go to cultivate in higher altitude areas. I believe that the wines that we make in Argentina, 98% of the wines that we make in Argentina are mountain wines, because if you see a map of Argentina, you can see that mainly of the regions are near to the Andes mountains. So the Andes give to us all the identity of our wines. And I like to say that the Andes give to us 4 very important things. The first is the climate situation. The second is the water. The third, the soils. And the fourth is that we are mountain people. When you wake up in our areas, you always have the mountain in your mind. But talking about the characteristics of the place, when you see our weather, we cultivate in a desert in high altitude because we are isolated from the ocean. Maybe it's one of the most continental wine areas in the world because we are very close to the Pacific, but we have the Andes in the middle, but we are very far from the Atlantic. So we have any ocean influence. But the mountain, like Thibaut explained, give us the altitude. And the altitude is maybe one of the main factors to explain our climate situation, but also the altitude change depend the latitude, because when you go to the north, that you are moving to warmer areas, you need to go higher. And when you come to Mendoza, you need to cultivate in lower altitude. And when you go to the south, lower. And And the altitude changed a lot the situation in terms of weather. So one of the greatest things of our area is that you can cultivate in different climate situations in few kilometers, because every time that you go up, you are moving to a cooler weather. And in the Uco Valley, for example, that is the area where we cultivate, in 20 kilometers, you can move from 950 meters to 1,700 meters. So the difference of altitude that you have is huge, and this gives a lot of climate difference. But also, it's not only altitude, it's also about light. We have a very pure sunlight because we are high, close to the sun, and we have no humidity in the air, so the pureness of the sunlight that we have is very strong. And our wines talk about this light. So it's high altitude talk about cooler situation, but with a lot of light. In general, when you think about cooler weather, you think in cloudy and wet. And in our area could be cooler, but with a lot of sun and very dry. So the conditions that we have are very special. Second, the water that we use to irrigate come from the Andes, because all the water that we use to irrigate come from the snowmelt of the Andes. And the third thing is the soils. All the soils where we are walking and where our vines are growing were material that was in the Andes millions of years ago. And then with alluvial movements, we had big movements of material from the Andes. So the soils were material that was in the Andes mountain. But because the way that the soils were formed and the origin of the Andes, we have a big diversity in terms of soils and in very small distance. So if you do a combination of different positions with the mountain, altitude, and different situation of soil, the interesting thing is that it's not possible to talk anymore about Argentina. We need to talk about the areas. And when you come to Mendoza, you need to do a double click and go to the Uco Valley. And when you go to the Uco Valley, you can divide the Uco Valley in villages. And every village has a unique situation in terms of altitude, soil, exposition, how close it's from the Andes. So we believe that the future of the region is the name of the place. And in particular, this Malbec Q is our expression from the Uco Valley, but inside of the Uco Valley come from two villages. One is Altamira and the other is Los Chacalles, that are two villages that has different characteristics, but are in front of the mountain, so has all the influence of the Andes. And our challenge in the winery is try to express this pureness of the weather and this texture or message that our soils can give to the wine. So we do a vinification in a very simple way in concrete vats, looking to have no any influence of aromas or flavors that come outside from the place. And also because we feel that Malbec like less oxygen during the aging. And then 70% of the wine was aging in concrete and 30 was aging in old barrels, only looking natural materials to age the wine. And when we think in the expression of this wine, we are looking that the wine explain our area. So it has to be a wine that talk about the cooler area because the altitude, but because the sunlight will have a lot of intensity, but we are going to find fruit, but also a lot of herbal expression that come from the natural vegetation that we have surrounding our vineyards. And then when you go to the mouth, we are looking for express all the texture and all the freshness and the tension that this kind of weather and soils can give to the wines.
Sebastian, can you tell us a little bit more about your decision to ferment in concrete? Have you done that kind of since the first vintage of the Q Malbec, or is that something that you decided on at a later time? It's such a fresh style. I also think it's quite floral, a lot of violets, and I like the herbal notes as well, but it has such purity to it. It's really beautiful. But can you tell us about the concrete? And
yes.
I'm sure our audience is interested in that.
What you say I like. I'm looking wines that has layers, and it's not only fruit or all. I'm looking that you have different layers, and it's very important on this how you cultivate the vineyards, because we cultivate wines more than we make wines. And then, but in the winery, we need to try to respect everything that comes from the vineyard. And what we are doing with concrete is nothing new. It's back to the future, because when you see the old wineries in Mendoza, were all concrete and big foudres or cask. When you see the winery where my grandfather started making wine, was all concrete. So at the end, we are not doing nothing new. Is again, come back to old things and restart. But really, I like concrete because it's a natural material, and in our case, all the vats that we have in our Piedra Infinita winery are made with sand, stones, and water from the same alluvial fan. So there is a big connection between the vineyard and the winery. But then, because it's a material that don't give any flavor to the wine, you have a very thick wall. So you isolate a little bit the temperature outside and the temperature inside. You have a micro-oxygenation through the concrete, but much less than for example, in a small barrel. I'm not saying that this is good or bad. I'm saying in our way to see the wines is what we are looking for. And we believe that, or we like to age Malbec with not a lot of oxygen. We think that in our style of wine, we want to keep all the tension, all the freshness. But again, concrete for me is a philosophy way to work in the winery, but it's not a magic place. If you don't have a great place, if you don't have a great vineyard, if you don't work very hard in the vineyard, then it's difficult to make a great wine in concrete. I believe that you can make great wines in stainless steel, in oak, in concrete, and you can make wines that are not interesting in the three materials. It's much more the place, how to work in the vineyard, and then the winery has to have the philosophy in order to express the wines.
I could not agree more, and I'm sure all winemakers do, hopefully. We'll come back to you, Sebastian, because I was told that you're really into soil, and rocks specifically was mentioned. So we'll come back to that when we come back together as a group. But Luis, I saw you hopped on. So if you wouldn't mind turning your video on, we are going to talk about the Luca Malbec next. I have the 2017 in front of me, but their 2018 actually was just named number 4 on Wine Enthusiast's Top 100 Wines for 2020. So congratulations, Luis, on that. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us about Luca and the Malbec that we have today. Thank you. Sorry, Luis, if you just wouldn't mind unmuting, that would be great.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, hello, and thank you. I arrived a little bit late. I'm coming from the Uco Valley today, and there was like a jam track. So yes, speaking about Luca, and I have the wines here. I don't know if we are going to taste them, but I have both Luca Malbec Old Vine 2017 and 2018. And yes, well, the story of Luca started in 1999. This wine is owned by Laura Catena. I started making these wines in 2001 until now, so has been a long history making these wines. And since the beginning, what Laura wanted to do was two things. First, make wines with an elegant style, with finesse. Is the reason when you open one of these bottles of Luca, you will always find wines with a good balance in terms of not too much alcohol, nice acidity, very smooth and polished tannins, very respectful use of oak. We age wines, these wines depend on the varietal, but from 12 months in oak until 18 months. So the idea is to add some, always put in front the flavors coming from the fruit and from the terroirs where we have the vineyards. So in general, an elegant style. And the other important thing in the beginning was to make other varietals that were not Malbec. I know we are showing today the Luca Malbec, but we started with Luca Chardonnay, Luca Pinot Noir, Luca, of course, Luca Malbec, Luca Syrah, and Luca Beso de Dante, which is a blend of mostly Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and a little bit of Cabernet Franc. So started to show in the world. At that time, there were not many Argentine wines around. I mean, in other countries. With these wines was something very pioneering. Other varietals from Argentina. For example, for Luca Chardonnay and Luca Pinot Noir, these two wines were the first single vineyard Chardonnay and Pinot Noir coming from Gualtallarí, which is today a famous region in Argentina. But at that time, there was unknown, and we made it. I mean, and we in the Catena family believed in that region for the cool climate, especially, and especially for these varieties. Then we discovered the impact of the sunlight intensity. But the beginning, when we planted in the early 90s, we were is the reason we planted at 5,000 feet. And we thought that were a good place for early ripening varieties like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, also Merlot. So this is this is one important step for Luca. We were pioneers making Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from this high elevation area, Tazzari. Then we discovered the impact of the sunlight intensity at this elevation, and then we discovered that was good for Malbec as well, because this sunlight produces a thicker skin in the Malbecs and also in other varieties. So it's been a long way doing research and learning how to work in every and also with the different varieties. Like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, they don't like much the sun. You know, the most famous Chardonnay and Pinot Noir come from areas with more cloudy days than Mendoza. So usually in those we keep the canopy, more leaves in the canopy and a thicker canopy covering the clusters to keep these aromatics and keep a better acidity for these varieties. Others like Malbec and maybe Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, they can handle better the sunlight, so we can work with a thinner canopy in the way that these clusters receive like flashes of light. And well, this is something that we now I'm telling in a short time, and the way we manage the vineyard in every place took us years of research to understand. Another important thing in Luca Malbec, we call it, you can see on the label, Luca All Vine Malbec, because for other varieties like the Malbec, we use growers. We buy grapes. We have long-term contract with growers, because for this style of Malbec that Laura likes, we think that the quality should come from all vineyards. Remember that these wines have concentration, but have very smooth tannins and have a very characteristic of finesse that we found in all vineyards, and the only way growers that already have owned these old vineyards. So Luca All Vine Malbec is a blend from 5 different vineyards in the Uco Valley that are between 50 years old and 100 years old. And of course, you don't find these vineyards at this elevation, 5,000 feet. They usually are in the valley, in the bottom of the valley. That is about 3,000 feet of elevation. Because when 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we didn't have the technology of drip irrigation to plant at 5,000 feet. So all these vineyards are planted in the bottom of the valley, 3,000 feet, irrigated with flood irrigation, with the water coming from the Andes, melted water that form rivers, and then we irrigate with that water. And this is not graft, and these are very old vines. These are very old populations of Malbec, pre-phylloxeric, that came to Argentina before the phylloxera in Europe and US. So I think it's a combination, the elegance and finesse that you will find in Luca Old Vine Malbec come from all this combination. The genetic material, this very old pre-phylloxeric population of Malbec, unrooted vines, very old, between 50 and 100 years old, living all these years in this combination of climate and soil, irrigating with this flood irrigation, very traditional. And of course, the climate in the Uco Valley. So it's the combination of grapes that then the only thing we can do in the winery is not ruin this quality coming from the vineyards, right? So the vinification is very, I don't know if I would say standard, but I think the most important decision, in my opinion, is the picking time. It's the decision the day you pick the grapes, the moment you pick the grapes. Every vineyard is different. And then in the winery, I try to keep the character of the place, the combination of place and these old vines. I ferment in stainless steel tanks. Try to keep as immaculate the character as stainless steel tanks, and then I age this wine for 12 months in French oak barriques. And about 30% is new oak and 70% used oak. So the idea, you will find some notes of vanilla coming from the 18, but always in front the pure fruit of Malbec. That I think these are jewels, these vineyards, very old, for us, our jewels. So I have here two vintages because Lizzie told me that maybe I had to speak because you have some vintages and the vintage is changing. So I have the 2017 and 2018. The difference in terms of climate was a small harvest in volume. We had some frost. We were at the end of El Niño. In 2016 was the smallest vintage in terms of volume, the smallest in the last 50 years. 2017 was the second smallest. So we came from two very small vintages, 16 and 17. So 17 is very concentrated, was very cool climate, cool vintage. Vineyards affected by the frost, the fruit set was poor, and then small yields because of this small frost. And 2016 was more normal, more the normal climate for Mendoza. So that was cold. I would say maybe you can find more concentrated 2017 and more but then 2018, would say juicier and more the type of flavor of Malbec going to plums and cherries. Maybe 2017 more floral.
Thank you so much, Luis. I can't get over
You're
the
welcome.
texture. The texture of the wine is just so gorgeous. It's so silky. It's so kind of velvety. Absolutely lovely. So thank you for that. And we'll come back to you here. We'll finish up with our fourth wine that Amanda's going to present for us. The Clo De Los Siete here. We're drinking the 2017. Amanda, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to share Clo De Los Siete's story with everyone here. I think I'll just start with, who are we at Clo De Los Siete and what are we? I think Clo De Los Siete, or we call it C7 for short, is a red blend. It's actually a blend of blends that's made by Michel Rolland, who has gained sort of an international reputation as this master blender. So Michel's originally from Bordeaux in France. He's not the only Frenchman on the call. And that's a region really known, their signature style is red blends. Usually they use Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, along with other native varietals, including sometimes Malbec. So Michel gained this reputation in Bordeaux for having an excellent palate and being an expert blender. So it's really a special skill set, because even though it sounds really simple, creating that final blend that tastes good to all of us is really difficult. So each vintage, it involves taking many different component parts, juice from different plots, different kinds of grapes, different vineyards, and figuring out the right balance of each to get this optimal taste and structural components in the final blend. So Michel's very good at this, very talented, and so much so that he gained a lot of famous clients in the Bordeaux region, and his reputation began to spread. So soon, wineries in other parts of the world and other up-and-coming wine regions started to reach out to him. So Michel became what's known as a flying winemaker. So even today, well, before COVID, he spent his time traveling to places like Napa Valley, Australia, and Argentina. And I think he's consulted in more than 14 countries in total, just advising wineries on how to optimize their blends to create the best possible red blend. So on the story, as the story goes, on one of these trips, Michel came to Argentina, to Mendoza, to consult with some winemakers there. And this was back in the 1980s, before Argentina had gained sort of this international reputation for its wines. And Michel really recognized early that this place had incredible quality potential, and he was really intrigued by how well Malbec grew there. Kind of as Veronica was saying earlier, Malbec already existed for centuries in France, but it was really not until winemakers in Argentina started planting it that people really understood its potential. He, was working on these wineries with these different winemakers, and he found this plot of land in what's now the Uco Valley, or already was the Uco Valley, but found this plot of land that was perfect for kind of what he saw as like what's so special about Mendoza and about Argentina and the potential for Malbec. So he found this big tract up in the end against the Andes Mountains. It was about 2,100 acres, and he realized it was too big for him to plant by himself. So he went back to Bordeaux and he spoke to some of his other winemaking friends, and they all came back in the late 1990s. There were 6 or 7 families altogether, including Michel. So they created Clo De Los Siete, which means the vineyard of the 7. So Michel and the rest of the 7 planted the land with vineyards, and they built 4 wineries. And this is where the blend of blends comes in, because each of the wineries even today, creates its own blend from its own vineyards under Michel's guidance. Then after they vinify each part of the blend separately, or each of the 4 blends separately, the 4 blends are brought back together to Michel, and he creates a new blend of the 4 component parts, which will then be bottled as Clo De Los Siete, which is here's the bottle. It sounds like most people have the 2017 in front of them now, which is great. It's delicious. Not that I'm biased, but I think it's very good. And so this one, the blend changes every year, but this one has about 52% Malbec. It's important because even though that blend changes every year, the majority is always Malbec. And then this blend, the 2017, has 21% Merlot, 15% Syrah, 7% Cabernet Sauvignon, and then a little bit of Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. So you can see there's a lot of different grapes kind of contributing to this. So this blend of these different grapes helps bring some complexity and richness to the wine, and gives it a very unique taste profile. And I think Louise mentioned this, but this is the 2017. It was, ooh, I'm so sorry. One moment. I'm working from home. Maybe some of you can relate. But this 2017, it was a difficult vintage for Clo De Los Siete. And I think the Uco Valley in general, it ended up being cooler than usual. Frost hit early in the spring, so the final yields were really reduced. But with these lower yields, Luis was just speaking to this, came some great flavor concentration. So this is one of my favorite vintages of C7, just because it's got so much flavor and depth. I think the tannins are really delicate, they're ripe and silky, it's full bodied, but with great balance. And I think it's delicious, and it pairs really well with food, especially, you know, really traditional Argentine food, like asado, meats, grilled meat.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And it's still Malbec at its core, but especially that Syrah, I really kind of see that coming through, the savoriness, the pepperiness that brings. And yeah, I saw earlier, I think the yields were close to about 29 hectoliters per hectare. So for those that are familiar, just incredibly low that year, but concentrated fruit. So we love it. Thank you. So let's all come back together here. And I have a couple questions that I have and also from the audience, and I'll kind of let each of you maybe kind of take one of these, but I want to flesh out a little bit more of kind of the history of winemaking in Argentina. Veronica gave us a little bit of that earlier, but I want to fast forward to kind of the modern era, and really this time of growth and investment happened in the late 80s and early 90s. And I was hoping maybe one of you could explain what triggered that kind of revolution, that beginning for Argentinian wine as we kind of know it today.
I can speak about the history in Catena. Maybe then Sebastián can speak about his family, Zuccardi, and Catena today. Laura is the 4th generation. And I think the first and second generations, they were producing wine, table wine. Remember that Argentina in the 70s, we used to drink, not me, of course, the people at the time, almost 100 liters per person per year. Today in the US is about 9. So we were per person per year, which is a lot of wine. And we were making wines from varieties that produce a high tonnage per hectare, like Criollas, which is your mission grape in the US, and red varieties and white varieties that produce a high volume for these thirsty people that we had at that time. Then the wine consumption started to decrease in quantity, but increase in quality. And I think at that time, almost nobody was exporting because the wineries here couldn't make enough wine for the domestic market. But then when the domestic market started to drink less is when the wineries here and the families, and that was the Catena family, Nicolás Catena. He, in this case, this family, he was living in the US, he was teaching in Berkeley, he has a PhD in economy, and met Robert Mondavi, got that inspiration, saw what Mondavi was doing in Napa, trying to reach the Bordeaux quality with Cabernet Sauvignon in Napa. So he started to invest in technology, in know-how, hiring consultants from Napa and also from Bordeaux, and investing in new varieties, new techniques in vineyard management, new technology in the winery, and that was in the middle of the 80s, at the end of the 80s, when we started to export. And then mostly was Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon, but then a little bit of Malbec. And when the consumers started to And I think especially in the US, when the consumer started to taste the Malbec, that it's a wine that is fruity, but has, as you said, texture and a long finish in the mouth. So it's good for beef, but it's not dry, it's not astringent. This polished tannin, that sometimes we call them sweet tannins, not because there is sugar or sweet, it's just because it's very smooth. And the people love the flavor, and it's when we had the Malbec Boom that was in the middle of the 2000s. Story as I lived, I started in 1999 in Catena, and I just saw growth since then, and also growing in quality, learning how to treat our vineyards and the grapes in the winery and in every different appellation, and has been a learning process, very rich and happy to be part of it.
It's been great to see as well, just the growth of higher end and premium Malbecs. A lot of times customers, they come in and they get introduced to the variety, and there's a lot of amazing value, but we also are seeing some just wonderful examples, that are still present great value, but that are a little bit more expensive, but we get to see kind of what Malbec is capable of at that price point. So that's really good to see. How is the domestic consumption going now, Luis? Is it leveled out, or is it still falling in favor of higher quality?
Oh, well, thanks to the COVID-19, the consumption growth a little bit last year. Today is about 20 liters per person per year. But yeah, last year with the pandemic, the quarantine, the people drank more wine and better wine. I think they were not spending in maybe traveling or going to restaurants, having dinner at home and spending in better wine. So today I would say that it's stable about 20 liters.
I can complete something that Luis said. For me, one interesting thing of Argentina in terms of the history is, I think Argentina is old world in new world. If you compare Argentina with other countries in the new world, the history of our wines is completely different, because the wine in Argentina started because we have a big immigration, and a big immigration from Spain, from Italy mainly, but also from France. And that immigration had the tradition to make wine and drink wine. So Argentina started making wine and drinking wine for this tradition. And for many years, all the wine that Argentina produced was drinking in the country. So today, 75% of the wine that is producing in the country is drinking in the country. So Argentina didn't export until the beginning of the 90s. So nobody knows outside of Argentina that Argentina was a great wine producer. So when Argentina started exporting, immediately people said, okay, this is a new country making wine. But if you compare with other countries that are considered new world wine countries, the history of Argentina is completely different. And when you analyze the history of our viticulture, that was a viticulture that started with the immigration, and then generation through generations continue growing, and in all this history has different periods of big consumption and low quality, big consumption and lower quality, then lower volume and bigger quality. The history of Malbec is also the history of our viticulture. It's a history of generation and generation of growers looking the vineyards, continue planting Malbec. They didn't call Malbec at that time, they called Francesa, and selecting and improving. So it's interesting to see that in many things, like the history of our, or the way that we drink wine, our culture of wine is more old world, and also the social structure of our vineyards is closer to the old world than the new world. And I like to say that in general, Argentina is more it's like old world in new world, because this tradition, wine is part of our life.
Thank you, Sebastian. I mentioned to you that I wanted to come back to you just briefly on kind of soils, because I know you are an expert in this. And just in the Uco Valley, can you just give us a little bit of the lay of the land in terms of kind of the main soil types that we have? You know, so many blend from different sites to bring in those different influences of different soils throughout the Uco Valley. Can you tell us what you have there, and kind of perhaps a little bit on just how they impact the end wine?
Okay, but Luis also knows a lot about soil. So Luis, feel free to say whatever that you want. One thing that for me is very important: wine is not altitude or soil. Wine is a whole combination. That the only way to talk about the wine is the name of the place, because when you talk about the name of the place, you are talking about this unique combination of the climate, where altitude is very important, but it's not the only factor, because the position with the mountain has a big impact. The combination of the landscape and the combination of the soils. We were talking a lot about altitude, and then now we are talking a lot about the soil. But we have to keep in mind that when we talk about the wine, it's a unique combination. It's impossible to separate. But one thing that I'm talking about the Uco Valley, that is where we cultivate, is that we have a huge diversity. Talk about the Uco Valley like one region is not enough, because when you go in, you need to divide in villages. And if you want to go deeper, maybe you can divide in parajes. And every place has differences, because in very short distances, you have a lot of variation in altitude, but also a lot of variation in soils, because the way that the soils were formed in our area were alluvial soils. So you have to imagine that millions of years ago, we had big glaciers in the mountain, then the earth heated, all this glacier melt, and the material come from the Andes to the flat area. But why we have this variation? Because in a very simple way, we have two big sources of diversity. First is that the Andes is very diverse. The geology of the Andes is very diverse. When you see the Andes, you think that is one wall, but then when you see a geological map, you can see that you have different chains, and the geology of these chains are different. So the material can come from one side of the mountain or mix. And the other thing is that the movement was with a lot of energy and very disorganized. So you have variation between the villages, but also inside of a village, you have variations in 10 meters, 15 meters, 20 meters. But one thing that is very interesting is that these alluvial soils in some areas, for example, has a very interesting uniqueness, that you can find a combination that is difficult to find in other places in the world, that is granite, for example, with calcium carbonate, that this is difficult to find. So we have alluvial soils, but the complexity of the alluvial soils, because the source, the material source that we had in the Andes mountain is very complex, and then with a lot of variation because the way that the soils were formed. And this was something that we rediscovered in one side, because it's not something new in the area, but now we are putting more attention in order to divide in different parcelas inside of the property, and try to talk about the uniqueness of different plots inside of the vineyards.
Thank you. Luis, anything to add, or Sebastian cover that?
No, just maybe like something shorter, is that Mendoza is a very arid area, so we need to irrigate, and the access to the water, we have two different sources. One is the river, and we have a net of canals that distribute the water from the rivers. All the agriculture was developed, and then the cities, everything close to rivers, because we need to, Mendoza, all the agriculture is concentrated in oases. Every river, every important river. So I would say 95% of the vineyards are in alluvial cones or alluvial fans, where all the soil was transported by this river many years ago, 2 million years ago. So the origin is very similar, it's alluvial. More recently, with the drip irrigation system, as I told you before, we could plant in higher elevation, but again, you need aquifers, because all this drip irrigation, usually the water comes from a well, that you make a well to reach the aquifer and pump up the water from the aquifer. And all these aquifers are below these alluvial cones as well. It's mostly aeolic origin, that is when the material was transported by the wind. But in general, all the origin of the soils in Mendoza is alluvial mostly. But then, as Sebastian said, all the Andes mountains, all the chains are not the same. We have areas with more limestones, area with more volcanic rocks and stones. So every place has its own characteristic, and of course the climate then impacts as well.
Thank you. Well, on that note of diversity, I will ask our last question here, and just as it pertains to the future of wine from Argentina. And I would love your thoughts on what consumers can expect in the years ahead. Grape varieties, winemaking styles, just what trends are you seeing for Argentinian wine, and what can we look forward to?
Well, the winemakers will know best, but I can share just an outlook as a newbie in Argentina, if you will. And when I say a newbie, I'm from Argentina, but going to visit these wineries, and I think I can add something to American consumer. The diversity that exists in Argentina is enormous. We have known Malbec, but Sebastian, Luis, Thibaut, they don't just make Malbec. We have Torrontés, we have Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, sparkling wine, Bonarda. And one of the things that Malbec has permitted the region to do was showcase its amazing quality of Malbec and open the door to these other varietals that these amazing winemakers, who I like to call them interpreters of the land, they interpret the soil and put it in a glass for us to better understand, nature. They have every bit of grit, every bit of knowledge and experience to make just about any varietal as an and one thing that I want to say, which was surprising to me, is when you think Argentina, the land of the red, it is the land of the red, but they make white, they also make sparkling wine. So these amazing winemakers can share much more about their wines, but I want to express that with Malbec, we have the best quality, which opened the door for these amazing winemakers to make great quality of other varietals as well. So while we're celebrating Malbec World Day, I encourage everyone to drink Malbec and something else from Argentina.
Thanks, Veronica. Anyone else want to add any thoughts for the future of wine from Argentina, and then we'll close?
Yeah, I will be quick. Yeah, exactly. It's something I explained at the beginning with Luca. We wanted to show other wines besides Malbec, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. We think the potential is very enormous. Remember that you go to France, where they have like every appellation with specific varieties cultivated in specific ways. They have been cultivating for 2,000 years. In Argentina, we have been cultivating maybe 400 years. Seba, correct me if I'm wrong, more or less 400 years. But making high quality top wines, I would say maybe 40 years, 30 years. So we have a learning process how to cultivate every variety in every place. And I think the potential to grow is very, very big. We are already getting good results, I think. And I think we couldn't be in a better place today in Argentina, because we are making very good wines, excellent wines today, with a huge potential and also freedom. We can cultivate new varieties, different varieties, try different trellis system, different things in the winery, and that is, in my opinion, is great.
Yes, and if I have to complete something, I agree that in terms, like Veronica said, we have a huge potential in terms of whites, looking the mountain, facing the mountain, and exploring through the soils. And I think there is, for many years, we grow thinking that Argentina was a red wine country. And today it's clear that we have a huge potential with whites, and we have to do a big work with Chardonnay or Semillon, that is part of our history, and also Torrontés, that is a native grape here. And also the diversity that Luis said. But if we try to do a double click in Malbec, for many years we were talking about Malbec, but when you go in deeper talking about Malbec, we need to talk about the areas. And when you taste Malbec from different areas, you can see that the future, or if we want to go one step more, we need to talk about the places. And when you walk the vineyards, when you see the history, when you taste the grapes, and when you make wine, you can see the adaptation that Malbec has to our place. But I like to think that the grape is the vehicle to express the places. And if we want to talk in deeper about the Argentina, we need to go to talk about the places, thinking that the grape will explain or will express this. And Malbec for me has a great adaptation because it's very transparent to the place where we are cultivating. If you taste a Malbec from the Uco Valley and a Malbec from Colome, are completely different. And when you go inside of the Uco Valley and you taste a Malbec from Altamira, a Malbec from Gualtallarí, and a Malbec from San Pablo, are completely different. And I think the future is in this, because if not, you can plant the same grape in every place in the world and make the wine with the grape. But when you talk about the place, you're talking about identity, about uniqueness. And the interesting thing is something that is happening, and it's the only way to put a place in the world is with many growers thinking in the same way. And what is happening today, that we have the terroirs, because we know that we have the terroirs, and we have many people walking in this way. And I believe that the future of Argentina will be extremely interesting in terms of diversity, but also in terms of deepness, talking about the places.
Your enthusiasm is contagious, Sebastian. Thank you for that. And thank you all so much for your time, for sharing your beautiful wines. Sebastian, Luis, Thibaut, Veronica, and Amanda, thank you all very much. And Michel Roland actually said there are good places to grow wine everywhere, but Argentina is especially blessed. So thanks for sharing the wines and the stories. Cheers. Have a wonderful
Salud.
evening.
Salud and thank you.
Salud.
Muchas gracias.